welcome our first keynote, who is Dr. Vincent Andrew. We have the pleasure of having you with us. Vincent, he is a lead facilitator at the Teachers Unit in the Brunei Darussalam Leadership and Teacher Academy, leading courses such as leading lesson study and developing leaders for collaborative action research. He actively facilitates lesson and learning studies across subjects and recently contributed to a publication on the development of teachers' pedagogical content knowledge through learning study. With a background in teaching economics in secondary and sixth form schools, he also brings 8 years of leadership experience as a school leader. The floor to you, Vincent. We look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Let me share my screen first.
Yes, that's good, Andrew. Vincent.
Okay, that's good. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon. It's 4-something, 4:12, 4:13 now in Brunei time. My name is Vincent Andrew. I come from Brunei Darussalam. As you can see from the map, we are a small and young nation from Southeast Asia. We gained our independence from the British in 1984. So this year we'll be celebrating our 40th National Day. So if you have not heard of Brunei Darussalam, the name Darussalam means abode of peace. We are not far away from the main capitals of Southeast Asia. We are about 2 hours away from Kuala Lumpur, Manila, Singapore, Jakarta. We hope you can visit us one day. So the title of my presentation is Training Middle Leaders to Lead Lesson Study, the Experiences of Novice Facilitators. I'm very keen as well to listen to the 11 MA students this afternoon after this particular presentation. Let me start off with the definition of lesson study, because I think it's good to start with a definition. This is the definition that I really like. And this is from Catherine Lewis. So she's a proponent of lesson study. So she says here that lesson study is a form of collaborative professional development, practice-based professional learning that originated in Japan more than a century ago, consists of cycles of experimentation and reflection on classroom instruction. So let me highlight some of the keywords there. Collaborative, working with other colleagues rather than in isolation, can be a powerful learning experience. Practice-based, learning by doing is probably better than just reading about it. Cycles of experimentation, testing ideas the teachers have discussed for implementation in the classroom. Such an important thing, I think, in our education system, to try different ideas. Reflection on classroom instruction. Things like, did it go according to plan? If yes, good. If not, why not? So the data for my presentation comes from a course I conducted in 2022 called Leading Lesson Study. So as you can see from this slide, there were 16 participants, and they were all heads of departments, and they were in charge of different subject areas, as you can see. They were all new to lesson study. 2 of them come from primary schools, 9 from secondary schools, 5 from sixth form schools. The average age, teaching experience is 19 years, So they supported 36 team members altogether. So in all, there were 52 of them carrying out lesson study in 2022. Leading lesson study is a compulsory course for Tier 1 certification under the School Leadership Unit of the Academy. So 16 is quite a big group. So what I did was I divided them into 2 groups. So I met those 2 groups separately. I would also like to say that it was during the time of the pandemic, 2022. So some of the sessions were held online, while later we were able to meet face-to-face. So the training for leading lesson study has 2 distinctive features. We use the learning study model, and the second distinctive feature is the school-based experience. This is very much similar to what James was describing when he talked about his model. So we had 5 training sessions altogether, as you can see on the slide. So let me go through what we did in each session. So in the first session, the participants were introduced to the literature on lesson study and learning study. So we talked about how they could form a lesson study group. And then we look at the literature on how researchers identified a tentative object of learning. And this is quite critical for learning study. To identify an object of learning is one of the hardest things to do. And then they also learn about how to set the pretest question. So that's for session 1. In session 2, the participants reported back to everyone. So they analyzed the pretest responses. They shared with us the possible critical aspects of the object of learning. We talked about how the lessons could be planned using a theory of learning. And we also talked about methods of data collection. In session 3, the participants shared their experience of planning, teaching, and reviewing the lesson. Then we talked about what they could do for cycle 2. So this is where we were able to see the challenges the leaders faced in cycle 1. And we were able to talk about how they could improve cycle 1 in cycle 2. So they go back to school again, and they carried out their cycle 2, their planning, their teaching, and their reviewing. So improving what they did in cycle 1. And finally, they shared with us their reflections as a lesson study leader. In session 5, we also had a session on how to conduct and analyze interviews with lesson study colleagues. So as you can see here, the school-based experience is also critical to the success of this particular model. They had to try doing this in the classroom. So each participant reports back after every session their experience of leading lesson study. This provides opportunities for learning from each other, as well as providing moral and emotional support. At the end of the course, participants submitted their lesson study reports and their presentation slides. 6 of them agreed to be interviewed. Now, in the learning study model, according to Ferenc Martin, he said, in all the complexity of teachers' work, he singles out 2 things. The first is the focus on the object of learning. Find the critical aspects that is necessary to discern in order to appropriate it. Second, he said, find the patterns of variation and invariance that are necessary for learning to discern each critical feature and bring these patterns about. The idea of the object of learning is quite important, so I will define it here. According to the literature, a specific insight, skill, or capability that students are expected to develop during a lesson or during a limited sequence of lessons. And there are 2 aspects to the object of learning. One is called the direct object of learning, defined in terms of content. And the other one is the indirect object of learning, defined in terms of the capability that students are supposed to develop. You also see here intended, enacted, and lived. And this is quite useful. Intended object of learning is what the teachers plan for, what critical features the teacher wants students to discern. The enacted object of learning is what dimensions of variation were opened up during the enactment of the lesson and what pattern of variation was used. The lived object of learning is what the students actually experienced or discerned based on post-test and enactment of lesson. So the definition for critical aspects is something like this: key elements that students have not made their own earlier and therefore must learn to grasp. However, critical aspects should be defined in relation to the phenomenon in question as experienced by learners, rather in relation to what is deemed critical in the curriculum or subject discipline. The research question for this particular study was this: what exactly does engagement in lesson study offer novice facilitators and their teams? The first finding from the data is that there is construction of new knowledge by planning and analyzing lessons using a theory of learning, in this case, variation theory, which can develop PCK. There's an example here. So this is a learning study based on the topic disease and immunity for year 10. So this is the pre-test for year 10. And you see 6 questions here. So the group decided to focus on question 6 because this is the one that was very problematic. So what they found was the answers to these questions included things like, so the question is, what prevents you from getting the disease every day? So most answered strong immune system and diet, washing your hands, and good personal hygiene. But none answered the skin. So the group used a pretest to determine what students needed to learn. So based on the teacher's reflection here, from the pretest, there was one concept that students mostly overlooked: the skin's ability as an effective physical barrier. So from the pretest, the lesson plan was designed to highlight the skin's ability to stop the entry of small particles, including certain microorganisms. So now the question is, how do you teach that? And that was the challenge for this particular group. The pattern of variation was something like this. So as you can see, the skin is invariant, but you have the particles here that were varied. And the critical aspect to be discerned here is the skin as the physical barrier to infection or entry of microorganisms. So what I will do is I'll use the leader's words to explain this. When I say the leader, the head of department for that particular learning study. So this is what he said. First, we asked the students how the skin reacts with water. Any penetration? And you would expect students to say, of course not. The water will not go into the skin. The second is the salt. So we let the students actually pour salt over the skin. Then sand. Students recall their experiences when they are at the beach, even when playing with the waves. Next is fungus, followed by bacteria, and finally virus. Although these are not visible, their effects can be felt in the body. Fungus can grow on the skin and cause irritation like athlete's foot. Bacteria can cause food poisoning, and virus can cause diseases like COVID. However, all these can only stay on the skin. This is the reason why during the pandemic, we are asked to frequently sanitize our hands. Fungus, bacteria, and virus will only infect the body if we don't clean our skin or touch our eyes, nose, or mouth. So this is quite an interesting interpretation of how they carried out this learning study using this particular pattern of variation. This is the group's reflection. Prior to the research lesson, it's stated on this slide, students were taught on microscopic units, and by comparing the sizes of different particles against the skin, students discern the skin as an effective physical barrier. So again, notice the pattern of variation here. The sizes of the particles vary, the skin was invariant, and from there, they were able to discern skin as the effective barrier. 10 out of the 18 students answered the skin in the post-test, while none were able to answer this in the pre-test. The second finding we found was that, there was mundane discussions and limited collaboration in some of the studies in the beginning. But then as it proceeded, it became deeper and it became more, the collaboration became more purposeful. So here we have another learning study, and this time it's a biology A-level study. And you can see here that before joining this learning study, the group said our collaboration was limited to improving our own knowledge content through shared resources, sharing of material content for lessons, and departmental tasks, not so much deliberately identifying and tackling common problems. So we normally tackle them by reteaching it, doing more revision with students, doing more practice using past year questions and drilling. And in the last bit, and this is the crucial bit, we did not think to find out together, collaboratively, using pre and post tests, what the object of learning, critical aspects and features are to allow for learning to take place. The third finding is the need for novice facilitators to be better prepared in facilitating teacher teams. You can see from these quotes how challenging it is to lead her team. Initially, there was pushback, resistance, and it appears a lack of understanding of the purpose of lesson study. However, at the end, the leader said, if I were to do this again, I would have a proper Gantt chart in order to make teachers more aware of deadlines and checkpoints in lesson study. And that's very real, I think, because teachers have a lot of deadlines to meet, and they want to know when exactly they have to complete certain things when they do lesson study. They need to learn better team management. So for example, getting school leadership involved here and asking their school leaders to write appointment letter to the teachers to make it official. This particular leader also said that she needs to read more research on summary writing and paraphrasing. In other words, it's very important for her to keep abreast with the literature review. And summary writing, which is the focus of this particular group's learning study, has not been something that she explicitly teaches in class. And that's a very good reflection, in my view, from her. The fourth one is the need for knowledgeable others who can support teams that appear stuck and move discussion towards the learner's ways of experiencing the object of learning. And we have this in our study here. We have teams that get stuck during their learning study. So for example, in this particular study, from the pre-test, you can see how the critical aspects are framed here. Students are unable to answer correctly. There's a lack of ability to read, improper way to answer the questions, poor knowledge of vocabulary. Now, framed in this way, according to Thorsten and Varana, the critical aspects, when framed in this way, they are seen as contextual explanations to students' expressions. Crucially, they do not focus on what students need to learn. And therefore, what happened during that particular study was that they did not explore nor address the critical aspects. Now, this is not a criticism of that particular study. In fact, maybe there is a need for a knowledgeable other here, someone who has deep knowledge about subject matter and how to teach. And I think many of the groups in this particular study would have benefited from a knowledgeable other. And of course, the question that we ask is, Where do we get these knowledgeable others, especially for a young nation like Brunei Darussalam? The fifth finding, and it's very rare to find this in the literature on lesson study or learning study, a sense of achievement from the students who enjoyed the research lessons and wanted more of the same. And you can see that here. On the left, comments from students involved in a mathematics learning study. On the right, comments from students in a science learning study. What about this? Lesson study for all topics. Wonderful, students saying that. And how great that would be for professional development. So I summarize my findings here. As you can see, the 5 different findings, which I hope will be useful for you. Let me say some concluding remarks here. I think it's very important for facilitators to develop their facilitation skills. And I recommend this book by Aki Murata and Christine Lee. The book is called Stepping Up Lesson Study, An Educator's Guide to Deeper Learning. There are many examples there from established researchers and experts in lesson study. I think researchers as well as facilitators, especially novice facilitators, they need to see lesson study as researching student learning and enhancing PCK. So it's not just about lesson observation per se, but it's about the whole process. From my point of view, it's also important to take time to research the critical aspects of the object of learning and use a theory of learning to plan and analyze lessons. And another piece of advice here, the Walthuis, she mentioned something about lethal adaptations. And I think that's a very good point that this particular researcher has made. And in the study that was carried out here in Brunei with the heads of departments, we followed closely the learning study process and therefore avoided lethal adaptations. For example, we tried to maintain the core elements of learning study and did not unnecessarily modify the practice. I would like to thank the 16 middle leaders and their teams for their very, very good effort, the school leaders who supported the middle leaders, and my colleagues at the Teachers Unit, Brunei Darussalam Leadership and Teacher Academy, for their constructive feedback and support. You might find some of the references here interesting for you, and some of them can be downloaded straight from the internet. I hope this presentation has been useful to you. My name is Vincent Andrew. I conduct notably 2 courses at the Academy, and these 2 courses are here, Developing Leaders for Collaborative Action Research and Leading Lesson Study. Once again, I want to thank James and Collaborative Lesson Study Malta for inviting me, and I would like to welcome everybody here to the Lesson Study Fraternity. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Vincent. Really good and insightful presentation, a lot to think about. I would like to encourage those present who would like to either, ask a question either in the chat or orally here. I think we have Tanya. Tanya, you can intervene with your question. I've read your question in the chat, but you can obviously pose it to Dr. Andrew.
Thank you, Dr. Kaleya, Dr. Andrew, and everyone present. I'm Tanya Borch from Malta, and I work at a technical college and aiming for technical university. So my question is regarding finding 2, Dr. Andrew. Thank you. It was a very succinct presentation. My master's is in education, and I'm 23 years working at the technical college, and I'm interested in the philosophy of education. So my question is, how did the facilitator direct teachers' talk from the mundane into the useful or the more efficient? So I don't know if my question is clear enough, but I'm interested in the language used and what directed the, let's say, the facilitator or the teacher driver to direct language used. I saw that in finding 3, some of the teachers said that it was it moved. So I did see in the findings that the student teachers did realize that it moved from the mundane to the useful. So if you could expand a bit on that, I would really appreciate. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Was that Tanya?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Tanya, for that very interesting question. In my view, when you do a learning study, when you conduct one, the discussion that you have with your participants will tell you whether your study is moving in the right direction or not. And I remember reading from the book by Aki Murata and Christine Lee. They were saying things like, I think it was a chapter by De Vries and Oefen, lesson study as an inquiry approach, where the kind of conversation that you can have will be more exploratory. And when you use exploratory kind of conversation during a lesson study, it can help participants to talk about in the language of learning study, talk more about the object of learning. What is it that the students need to learn? So, for example, things like the concept of the critical aspect, the object of learning, and so on. So that is my take on this particular question that you have. So it has to be very focused, because lesson study is very much an inquiry approach. And if it's going to be centered on learners, then we have to talk about the students' responses have got to be part of the discussion in a lesson study. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you, Vincent. I think we have Neni, who would like to also ask a question. You can go ahead, Neni.
Yes, thank you, James. My name is Neni from Universitas Negeri Surabaya, Indonesia. Thank you, Vincent, for giving us a very insightful lecture about lesson study. To be honest, I'm a newbie in lesson study, so I have like several questions to Vincent. Is that okay, James?
Okay.
So yeah, okay. So the first one is in your research, the pre-test you showed to us is the qualitative one. You have like 6 questions that should be answered qualitatively, and you also like doing the analyze the data also descriptively. So my question is, can we do the pre-test in a quantitative way, or we should do the pre-test and post-test in qualitative way to be described? And the second one is in the process of a lesson study, you show us the diagram about the research procedures, I think, in which you were going to school 3 times, right? So you have like 2 cycles in one research. And my question is, are the teacher teams, the team teachers, they were doing the lesson for the same topics in those two lessons, or are they doing different topics, but you focus on the teacher skill to be analyzed?
Thank you so much for your questions.
The last one, please. So I really want to know. And the last one is who made the pre or post test? Did the team teachers or the researcher as the outsider of the lesson study? Thank you.
So I answer your third question first. All the pretest questions were developed by the heads of departments together with the teachers in the team. The heads of departments come from the school. So after they have their training at the academy, obviously they will have to go back to school. And that is where they practice the learning study. So the 2 cycles are based in their schools. So they have to work with the colleagues in their schools.
Okay, so these questions come from the facilitators, you mean? The team?
Yes, from the
leaders
novice facilitators, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And with regards to your pre-test question, I think the important thing about setting a pre-test question is you want the students to reveal the differences, the qualitative differences in the way they experience the object of learning. That would be the aim of the pre-test. Thank you.
Okay, so all will be qualitative because that's the research, the purpose of your research, or is that any possibility to do it quantitatively?
Of course, if you have a mathematics lesson study, for example, the one that I have seen, the novice facilitator obviously use mathematics questions, and the way they analyzed it is qualitative because they try to see the different ways in which the students handle the content.
Okay. In my current research at lesson study, I'll try to figure out the reflective skill of my teacher students at school. So do you think qualitative is more useful in this topic or the quantitative one? If I want to capture, because I think the philosophy of this lesson study that made me interested doing this topic is because the reflective ways of teachers, right? So they learn from their previous experience in teaching, and then they replan the teaching to be more effective or more or better. So so that's why I want to see the capabilities of my student teachers while they are doing the lessons at school, but I want to focus on the reflective thinking. Do you think making the 6 pre-test questions in qualitative way is more useful in this topic?
That would be, very contextual, Manny. How you frame your questions in a lesson study will have to be decided by the team in question. The group has to decide what is best.
All right. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Manny.
I'm not sure whether there is someone else who would like to ask a question or pass a comment to Vincent. Vincent, maybe something that I've picked up from your presentation was the intended, enacted, and eventually the lived, object of learning. And here you focused on the students. In our course, we try to also focus this on the novice lesson study facilitators, Can they identify an object of learning? What would they like to learn when they're doing this lesson study? So it's their intended learning, what's enacted and what's lived. And I think they go in parallel, So while they're doing lesson study, we found that it's good that they focus on the students, but it's also good that they focus on themselves as learners because they're learning to lead lesson study. Not sure what you can say about that vis-a-vis your teachers, your people doing your courses.
Yes, definitely, James. I think we see 2 levels here. One is on the level of the students, right? So we want to see what's the lived object of learning eventually for the learners. But we also see that the novice facilitators are also learners. And therefore, we ask the question when we interview them, what exactly have they learned by being part of this learning study? So that is the lived object of learning for the novice facilitators. And, the responses when I interviewed them have been very, very fascinating. And I hope to report them in a paper.
Thank you, Vincent. Tanya, very shortly, please, if you'd like to pass a comment or just one final
Yes,
question.
please. Very short, final question. I needed to ask about the logistics of the lesson study. I missed whether you did the lesson study immediately after the lesson, or was it a specific set time? Thank you.
Okay, I'm trying to understand your question, Tanya. Are you saying the lessons are held immediately after the discussion at the academy?
No, the other way around, whether the discussions between the novice teachers were done after they conducted the lesson themselves, or whether it was a specific time, or I'm talking about the space and the timing here. When did the discussions take place?
Okay, now let me make it clear. The heads of departments, they are all very experienced teachers, but they are novice lesson study leaders. So leading lesson study is very new to them, even though they are experienced teachers. So after they have their training at the academy, they go back to their school, and the gap between each session is about 3 to 4 weeks. And this gap is needed in order for them to actually discuss what they have learned from the academy.
Very good, thank you. You answered my question.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you. Thank you, Vincent. Thanks a lot for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your research with us.